Hello, my name is Kevin VanDorn. Today I will demonstrate how to perform data discovery using SAP Web Intelligence. I'm using version 4.2, but you can accomplish this with version 4.1, Service Pack 2, or later. To start this process, you can use either the web-based Java applet or use the Rich Client tool. The functionality is identical. For this project, I elected to use historical baseball data from Lawman's baseball database. The only pre-work that I will do is convert this CSV file to Excel. After downloading the file, then I upload the file to BI Launchpad. If you are using the web application, you will need to ensure that your Web Intelligence preferences are set to use the Java applet for creation and modification of documents. So the next step will be to launch Web Intelligence, the application, and the Java applet as we set our preferences for earlier, which will take just a moment, being Java a little bit slower. Give it permission to run. Now Web Intelligence will open up. Once it's open, then we'll have to create a new document using that new document icon there. Then I'll use Excel as a data source. Now it's going to ask me where I want to give the file. In this case, we're going to go back and browse to the public folders, Excel data sources, where I put that file originally, and select it. Once I've selected it, you'll see a little wizard that will allow me to select the default sheet name or a different sheet name if I want to use a range, if the first row contains columns, etc. Once I'm happy with that, I'll click OK, and then I'll see a representation of the data, like the first 100 rows, what columns are up there, the names of them as they are by default. It tries to determine if it's a dimension or a measure, whether it's numeric or a string. Typically that's how that works. It's not going to be 100% correct, so we'll have to make some modifications in a minute, but that's kind of a first pass what the data looks like. Let's go ahead and I'll run that so we can see what that first pass looks like in the report, so we can see what we need to modify, not necessarily correct, but get into the right data format and naming. Okay, so the data is coming back now. Everything looks okay. At first blush, one thing I do see is that the year numbers look a little funny. I don't think there's a year 11/3/19, so obviously that's aggregating interestingly. But first of all, let's go at the first problem we'll run into is unfriendly field names. So what I'm going to do is rename these fields in the query panel, not in the Excel spreadsheet, but in the query panel, and we'll do that next. So the way I do that is go back, hit Edit Query, and I can select each of the fields I want to change. We're going to start with year ID, change that to year, change it to league, go through each of these. And the idea here is, you can change it in the query panel, not modify the spreadsheet. So if you want to keep the spreadsheet as it is for other people to use, you can definitely do that. So you're basically just changing the definitions as Web Intelligence is seeing the fields. It's changing the names on the fly for you. Apologize, this probably takes the longest part of this whole presentation, is just going through and touching up each of these field names. And if you're not familiar with the lore of baseball, they love statistics and they love their abbreviations. Everybody understands them that follow the game, but if you're an outsider, not necessarily. That BB is based on balls or walks. And I'm also doing some typing here if it's runs allowed or runs by batters, home runs by batters versus home runs allowed, strikeouts pitched versus strikeouts allowed. It all matters because you're depending on who the point of view is. Base on balls allowed here, as I said, is walks allowed. ERAs, earned run average. CGB, complete games, and that's, if the pitcher completed the game or not. SHO, shutout, so did the pitcher not allow any runs during the game, or did the team not allow any runs per game, not the pitcher, so it's at the team level. They changed name to team name, and there you go. As you'll see, the names will all change. So the next type of issue you might see is the incorrect data type. So you might want to have, you might detect some dimensions that should be measures, and measures that might need to be dimensions. And we talked earlier about this for the year aggregating. We don't want that to aggregate, so we want that to be a dimension. The other one is a simple one that's not really going to matter in this case, but we're going to change it anyway, is the G-home, which is home games, which since the first 100 rows are not showing any data, it's interpreting it as a string. So we're just going to go ahead and change that. So we'll go back to the query panel, select year, and we'll see that we'll change that from a measure to a dimension. We'll leave that as a number, which is fine because we can use that, the fact that it's a number later. The G-home, which is the home games, we'll change that from a dimension to a measure. We're not going to use it for our analysis, but just to show you can change it in either direction. We'll make that a sum aggregation. Run that back, and then you'll see that year will then now change to normal looking years. The next problem you might see is the fact that some of the aggregations are the incorrect type. By default, most of them are going to be sums if they're aggregated at all. So you want to have to go back and change your definition in the query panel to average. So earned run average in this case, that's what we're looking at, and in the name average. So that's a pretty good indicator that we want this, instead of being a sum, we want to be an average. So when I select it, it highlights that field down there in the bottom right. Select that, run the query. It's not going to look much different when it comes back. It's just going to be how it calculates when we use it in formulas. Since we are looking at historical data, one of the issues that you often run into is the fact that names change. People, teams move around, product name changes, etc. in other cases. So in this case, we've got the Braves, the Angels, the Nationals, and the Marlins have all either moved or renamed over time. And so in this case, we're going to use the report variable option to handle that. So I'm going to add a new report. Let's go ahead and drag team name into the new tab, and we'll expand it so we can see it a little bit easier. Now the next thing I want to do is I'll select that and then right click and select group and manage groups. First of all, we're going to go ahead and we'll look at the Atlanta Braves, the Boston Braves, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new group called Atlanta Braves Plus. In other words, that lets me know they're aggregated. I can now search for Milwaukee and do the same thing with the Milwaukee Braves and add them to the Atlanta Braves Plus group. Next one we'll look at is the Angels, so we can then hit group again, manage groups, and then I can actually search. I can search for Angels. Alright, there's 4 variations of the Angel. They haven't moved, they're all in the same place, but they just renamed them over the years. In this case, we're going to go with the latest name, the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, in their final name. So we're going to group all their statistics into that one name. Alright, so they're grouped. Let's search for the Nationals. Create a group for the Nationals, and a few years ago the Montreal Expos moved from Montreal to Washington and then became the Washington Nationals, so we'll go ahead and group the Expos data into the Nationals as well. And let's see, we'll look at Marlins. So the Florida Marlins became the Miami Marlins a couple years ago, so we're going to go ahead and group all of their data into the Miami Marlins. Alright, so now I've done that. That looks like it's going to aggregate the way we want to. Now I'm going to go ahead and change my view of the objects that are in the report from alphabetic to query view. and that exposes the variable folder when I do that. So if I scroll down, I can see in that variable that team name plus. It tells me it's aggregated. You can name it whatever you want, of course. And then you'll see that it's there, and I can edit it anytime I want to. All right, next thing I want to do is create a line chart. And with this, we're going to create a line chart for year and earned run average by year. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that table. Don't need it anymore. The variable's created. Once that disappears, we'll go ahead and go up to Report Element, select Line Chart, drop that analytic type onto our workspace here. Okay, we're going to expand it out a little bit because there's a lot of years in this data. 1871 to 2015, so we need some space. We'll right click this and we'll hit Assign Data. Set our category axis is going to be year. This is a dimension that we have created in the original data set, remember. And then the value will be earned run average. Scroll down. So we select that. We're going to get that will render, but there will be something that annoys me. As you'll see, it becomes just fine. But the fact that year is numeric, it shows commas. So this is something I'm going to want to fix. So once again, I'm going to rely on the variable engine inside Web Intelligence. So let's scroll down to under variables, right click new variable, and I'm going to create a new variable called season. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a formula that says format number, and I'm going to select our original year dimension, and I'm going to format it so it's 4 digits with no comma, so 0000, and quotes there. Test it out, looks good. Now it's called season. Now I can right click again on that chart, hit Assign Data, and I'll swap out year for my new variable called season and drop that into the analytic. And voila, my commas have disappeared. Now I have it by season, which equates to year, but it doesn't show the commas. As with anything else, you want to make sure you're going to save your report that you're working on, so in case you have an outage, you don't lose everything you've done. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to save it to my favorites there on the BI platform, BI Launchpad, and I'm going to call it Data Discovery Baseball, keeping in mind that I can share it with anybody on the BI platform this way, which is one of the big benefits of doing this in Web Intelligence. So the next thing I want to do is create an input control for year. So essentially I want to filter the number of years globally. I can either do it on the report tab or globally. In this case I'm going to do it globally. And since year is a number, it's going to allow me to use this double slider technique. So if I hit new input control and I select from the query year, which again equals season. So year, select the option of double slider. And the minimum value of the year which is required is 1871. That's the minimum that's in the data set. The maximum value being 2015. Okay. You see there down at the bottom. Now I'm going to select my default minimum value as 1991, just so we can see a smaller data set, but still get a good level of history. And then we're going to have this applied to the whole document, not just to the tab where we're looking at currently. And then we'll finish that, and then you can see when that's done, it will then filter 1991 to 2015. The next thing I do is similar. I want to filter on just 2 of the leagues. There's a lot of leagues that have been in over the history of baseball, but we're filtering here on the National League and the American League since they're the modern era. So I'm going to select League as an input control. And from this, I want my list of values only to include AL and NL. So we'll do that. And then for our default values, we'll get check boxes. With default values, we'll also select AL and NL, so we don't get any other data showing up in the report. And then we don't need 5 rows, so put 4 for this, and hit next. And again, I'd like this to be on the whole document. And there we go. Now it's time to start doing some analysis. So I want to take that line chart and turn it into a combination chart. I'm going to compare strikeouts pitched to home run by year, and I want to move the legend to the bottom. So it's not too difficult. So let's right click on this and turn this, and we'll hit more transformations, and then we'll go to line chart or column, combined column line chart with 2 axes. Alright, for our value, we're going to change that first to strikeouts pitched, and our second axis we will have home runs by batters. Right, so we'll click OK, and you'll see that we have strikeouts and home runs on the same chart over time. So that's our first one. But now I have my legend off to the right. I think I gotta have a little bit more space to see more years without making a bigger chart if I put my legend on the bottom. So right click on that, go to the properties, select my legend. Let's put that on the bottom and even add a little more space. I don't want to see the title of the legend either, so let's go ahead and hide or make invisible the title. Click OK, and there we go. As you'll see when it's done, the legend is now on the bottom. So we have 2 axes, and you can see as you hover over, the values show up for these as we hover. Looks pretty good. Alright, the next thing we want to do is I want to resize this chart, copy it, and then compare shutouts to complete games by season. Simple enough. I'm just going to carefully grab the corner here and then get it to about the size that I want. So I can hit multiple analytics on one page. We'll right click. Let's move it up to the top here. Okay. Now it's a right click, copy, and we'll paste it right next to the existing one. Now all we need to do is change the values that we're comparing, right? Don't have to leave the years in place. We'll just replace strikeouts pitched with complete games and home runs with shutouts. Click OK. There you go. Now you have 2 charts that are similar, showing different information. Now let's create a heat map, and what we're going to do is compare team names, complete games, and we're going to replace the team name with our variable that we created. And also we'll note that there's one more, Tampa Bay, that we'll have to change as well. So let's create a heat map. Drop down below that combo chart, and again, very similar. We're going to hit assign data. My categories are going to initially be the team name, and then we're going to use complete games. So what we'll see now is the heat map by color showing, red being not very many, green higher, green being a lot. So as you can see there, we have the Washington Nationals and the Expos. So there should be one. So if I'll go ahead and assign data, change that from team name to the team name combination. Okay, and now if I hit OK, you'll see the Expos disappear and all that gets grouped into the Nationals. But I see 2 Tampa names, so we need to fix that now, which is not a problem. So we'll just go edit the variable. I'll look for Tampa. We have 2 teams there. We'll group the Rays, and then the Devil Rays will become the Rays also. Looks good. Click OK. And you'll you'll see they'll get merged. Next, let's create a very similar tree map that compares those same teams to shutouts. So we'll go ahead and copy this heat map, paste it right next to the heat map, and then I'm going to right click and turn that into a tree map. And then we're going to change the weight to shutouts by team. As you can see, that there's a nice tree map, but I can't see who's what, so let's go ahead and modify the properties and display the label or the team names, and make the font black, and then click OK, and now we'll see the team names as well. So let's do a little deeper analysis. So in 1973, the American League introduced the designated hitter rule, which allows hitters to bat for pitchers. So pitchers don't have to bat anymore. And so the idea would be to increase the offensive statistics for baseball. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and filter the years from 1963, which is 10 years before the rule went into place, to 1983, which is 10 years after the rule went into place, to see what impact there was. So first we'll do that, and then I'm going to go ahead and create a new tab in the report. Alright, I'm going to create a new line chart, and again we're going to select season, and then we will select strikeouts pitched. So the idea here is to see, well, okay, so we can see how many strikeouts there were. That just gives us an overall number, but it doesn't give us any variation. See, the National League did not implement this rule. So we'll move the legend to the bottom again, and so we can see overall strikeouts, but now I want to compare the American League to the National League. So if I assign data, and for the color I select league, now I can see the variance between the two leagues over that time frame by each year. And it's really kind of hard to tell, but it looks like the American League is up sometimes and down sometimes based on strikeouts. So I'm not really sure how that much that works, but we'll change the coloring a little bit because I just like the basic colors better than the default colors. Just able to see a little bit of difference. So that's the strikeouts. Let's do the same thing for home runs, complete games, and earned run average. So what we'll do now is I'll go ahead and right click on that chart and copy it, paste it next to it, assign the data, instead of this time as strikeouts, we'll do home runs. Okay, now you can see the American League is definitely raising above the National League by year since the rule change went into effect. Paste it again. This time we'll change it to complete games. And as you can see, the American League initially they're doing really good. 73 on, they're having a lot more complete games. So they're not having to pinch it for the pitcher. And then finally we will change the last one to earned run average. And as you can see, not a lot of change in earned run average, but the earned run average is a little bit higher in the American League than the National League. So I think that's what they were going for initially, and that's what they got. The pitcher's not hitting so often. The offensive statistics definitely improved in the American League over the National League. Now, if we stretch this out a little bit, or actually bring this to more current time, we'll bring this up to 73 as our starting point, and then expand that out a few years. You can see actually there's even a little bit more separation for strikeouts, for home runs, and ERA. But complete games in both leagues are going down considerably. There's almost becoming non-existent. We'll go all the way to 2015, and we see some strange things, and the fact that the data kind of merges again. And I think what is happening is that you're seeing more and more usage by the National League of pinch hitters more often, and so therefore it's kind of diluting the initial effect that they were wanting to get. Alright, so you can see over time the impact that the rule change has had and how it's all come back together. So the next thing I want to do is go ahead and save this tab as and rename it as DH analysis for future reference. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to look at teams, how many teams have won World Series over the years, and then rank them accordingly. So I'm going to go back to my variable engine for this. So essentially I'm going to look at team and count years where the World Series wins equals yes. And we'll name that variable WS wins. So let's go and we'll add a new report, a new tab to the report. Go to our variable engine. The first thing I'm going to do is create a variable that counts years. So we'll make this a measure, and I'll call it year count. Under the aggregate functions, I will expand that and select count, and then select the year dimension. We'll test that out, and by default it is going to be a distinct count in the way this works. So it counts years. You can put the word distinct in there, it won't hurt anything if you want to be absolutely 100% sure. So we've created our year count variable. Now I'm going to create another variable based on that variable. So we'll right click on that, new variable, also a measure. We're going to call it WS wins. So I'm going to do 0 plus, so our default value, if it's null, it'll be 0. Year count, but in this case I'm going to only count the years where our WS wins flag is equal to Y. That's one thing I love about this variable editor. It allows you to, again, do cross data analysis. So now we have a new variable. Next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and create a table. So I'm going to drag that team name variable we created onto the workspace. And right next to that, I'll take our new measure called WS wins, put it next to there, and expand out the teams so we can read them easily. And now I'm going to put a filter on this table because I only want to see teams that have won World Series in the time period that we've already selected. So in this filter, I'm going to filter it just down to the WS wins column where the field is equal to Y. Now that's only going to remaining teams that have actually won the World Series in the years we've selected. Now I'm going to sort those values in a descending fashion, so we have a ranked set of values. Alright, following on the theme of World Series winners, let's go ahead and do some more analysis. We're going to create a line chart that shows earned run average for the season for all teams. Then I'll create a variable that will just show it for the World Series winner, and we'll compare and contrast those. So let's go ahead and add a line chart. Instead of using the assigned data method, I'll go ahead and just drag seasons on there, and drag earned run average. We can do it either way. I'm showing you a couple ways you can do this. So now we see the earned run average by season for all teams, which is great. But now I want to know how the World Series winner did for each season. So I'll create a new variable called ERA WS. Alright, and we'll go ahead and select earned run average, where we're going to use that flag again. The WS win flag is equal to yes, or Y. And now we have another variable. Now I can right click on that line chart, and I can assign data and add another measure to it. And that's what we'll do. We'll hit the little plus sign under that and select our ERA WS. As you can see, the earned run average is typically better for the home run winning team, or the World Series winning team, than the rest of the league, which makes perfect sense. Alright, so we have a filter on an object, not the whole table, which is kind of nice feature to be able to do. Alright, so we're going to copy that table below, and we'll right click on here, and I'm going to remove the World Series winners, so it's going to be back to more of the original view. But in this case, I want to put a filter on the whole chart, so it's only going to be for World Series winners, and you're going to see why I do this here in a minute. So we're at World Series wins equal to yes or Y, which is going to give us the just World Series winner, which lines up with that second line on the original chart. Now what I want to show though is by team. So if I make the region color by team in my legend over on the right, you'll see the team names associated with the colors. Alright, now let's go ahead and show the ERA values for each of those teams. We'll make the font smaller and black so we can read it a little bit better. A little bit hard to read because it's not in the right direction, so we'll make it a horizontal flow. And there we go. So for the interest of time, I think that's where I'm going to leave it today. But as you can see, we just scratched the surface. There's so many more ways that you could analyze this data. So I'm hoping that you actually learned something today, was a good use of your time, and we look forward to your questions.